Hello and welcome to Hot and Heavy, the ELAINE NEEDS Podcast. I'm your host, Shivani Desai. Today I'll be talking about Season 7, Episode 9, The Sponge. Hello everyone. I hope everyone's doing well out there. I wish I was in better spirits this morning that I'm recording this, but unfortunately I did get some pretty bad news from India about a cousin of mine who passed away. She had been ill for several years, on and off with, doing well, dealing with her illness, and then having some pretty tough times. And unfortunately, she just couldn't get past this last really rough time with her lung issue that she struggled with for 10 years. So it's actually very surreal that she's gone. She was just someone in my life who I can remember since honestly, this sounds weird. One of my first memories is seeing her from a crib. Like, I can't explain it, but I just have a memory of her face looking over the edge of a crib, and I see her from that angle. And just throughout my life, she would visit from India quite often, and she was just a very supportive person. With all of my creative endeavors, she always sent me messages of encouragement and excitement, whatever it was, big or small, with my career. She was a big supporter of mine, including this podcast. She was very excited about it and would send me little things about Seinfeld, and especially Elaine. If she saw something on the internet, she would always send it to me. And it just felt good to feel that support from someone who always looked out for me too, to be honest. She and my father were very, very close. So she was my father's sister's daughter. She would tell me so many stories about my father when he was younger. Their bond was just very, very strong. And so she would always tell me some really wonderful, amusing, and touching stories about my father, both when he was alive and especially after he passed. She had a lot to share. As awful as it is for us who love the person, sometimes it's just better to let them go for their own peace and comfort. She was suffering for quite a while. And from what I spoke to some of my relatives about, she seemed to have just given up. Her will to live wasn't there anymore. So it's a merciful thing to kind of rejoice in her passing so that we know she's not suffering anymore. But it's still hard for those of us left here on Earth and missing her. So I'd like to dedicate this episode to my cousin, Kalpana Suman Desai. Speaking of, just untimely deaths, I did want to mention the shocking death of Matthew Perry. Seems weird to talk about that right after I'm talking about my cousin's death, but I just wanted to acknowledge that. It's pretty major news this week. And he himself said, if I died, I don't think people would be surprised. They'd be shocked, but they wouldn't be surprised. And I think that's pretty spot on. Actually, Greg of Greg Sack Lunch was the first to inform me. He sent me a TMZ article that he had been found dead. And I was definitely shocked, but I was also like, I'm totally not surprised. I read his memoir. It was just very clear what a tortured person he was for his whole life. And that's what I think is the real tragedy there. For anyone who lives with that kind of addiction and those kind of demons inside, it's, I wish, it sounds weird. I didn't know him, of course. And I've seen some posts about, I guess for lack of a better term, people defending just fans being devastated by this. And I think it's fair when, even though you don't know an actor, sometimes their presence in your life has been so profound because you've watched their work for years, and maybe their work is a comfort to you. Maybe their work brings you peace and happiness when you really need it in the dark times of your life. So while it is odd to mourn someone you've never met, I do think that you're mourning that person who brought you a lot of light when you needed it. So that for me is Matthew Perry for sure. I think he, for all of his demons and tortured times, he certainly got it together enough to share his comedic genius with us in many different shows and interviews. And I'm glad he was able to get that book out because I do think it will help a lot of people struggling with addiction and those similar demons. Okay, so with this episode, I am so excited for you all to hear my chat with Amie Kelbing. She is the host of the Spinster Life Podcast, which is, I highly recommend this podcast to anyone. I will have all the information in the show notes for you. I was a guest on Amie's podcast a while back when she invited me on to talk about the Seinfeld spinster herself, Elaine Bennis. She and I had so much fun talking about Elaine and what she brings to the show, her spinsterhood, and why it was important to see that at that time. And anyway, Amie is fantastic. We had so much fun talking about this episode. She expressed to me that she would really love to be on the Sponge episode when I cover it. And I really enjoyed our conversation, and I'm really excited for you all to hear it. I'm going to be peppering my conversation with Amie throughout this episode, so it'll sound a little different than the normal format, but I think you all will agree it's well worth it. Amie has some fantastic thoughts. Okay, so the synopsis for The Sponge is as follows. When her chosen method of birth control goes off the market, Elaine becomes extremely selective about whom she sleeps with. Kramer walks for an AIDS event, but gets beaten up because he refuses to wear a red ribbon. Jerry gets the phone number of a girl he wants to date off Kramer's charity walk sponsor sheet. George upsets Jerry by telling Susan some of Jerry's secrets. This episode was written by Peter Melman. In the first scene, we are at Monk's. Elaine and Jerry are at a booth, and Kramer approaches with his AIDS Walk sponsorship form, and he tells them he needs them to sponsor him. Well, Elaine tells him she really admires him joining the fight against AIDS. He says, I couldn't live with myself if I didn't do something. He talks the talk and he walks the walk. Not like some people who just wear a ribbon. And then Kramer gets up and leaves the table. Jerry gets up to grab a ketchup bottle from the next table over. Elaine notices his new jeans and asks, still a 31 waist? Yep, since college, Jerry says. Jerry notices that Lena Small is on Kramer's list. Elaine is curious who that is. Well, apparently it's an unlisted phone number girl Jerry was going to call for a date. Oh, you're not gonna cop a girl's phone number off an AIDS charity list? Jerry's like, well, you should admire me. I'm aspiring to date a giving person, but you're a taking person. That's why I should date a giving person. Otherwise, everyone's taking. Elaine warns him she's going to ask how you got her number. Oh, I'll just say I met a guy. Oh, yeah, what did he look like? I can't remember. I just come from buying a speedboat. Elaine gets distracted. You're buying a speedboat? See, we're already off this subject. Jerry is confident he just needs to get past the first conversation and he's home free. Well, I don't know about that, Elaine doubts him. Oh, what if Billy did this? He asks about Elaine's current boyfriend. She kind of smiles and says, well, oh, you really like this guy, Jerry asks. Very much. And how's the sexual chemistry? Haven't been in the lab yet. But Elaine says she is birth control shopping today. Kramer arrives back at the booth just in time to hear that, and he asks, are you still on the pill? Oh, Kramer. Elaine clearly doesn't want to talk about it. And he says, I think birth control should be discussed in an open forum. Fine, Elaine relents. The Sponge, okay? The Today Sponge. Oh, wasn't that taken off the market? Elaine says, no way. Everybody loves The Sponge. Kramer says, no, he read it in Wall Street Week. Louis Rukeyser. All right, so here's the first installment, the first peppering of my discussion with Amie. Hey, Amie, how are you?
Hey, Shivani, I'm great. Thanks so much for having me. It's really exciting to be here.
Oh, I'm so glad you requested to do this episode. So I'm just curious if you could just sum up what it is you love about The Sponge.
I think it's a great Elaine episode. Although, on rewatching it, I think I remembered her the most of this episode, but she's not really like the bulk of the episode, even though it's named after her. She is not in it as much as I would want. And I just love this frank and open conversation about birth control. There are some things about their depiction of Elaine's wanting to procure all the birth control she can that maybe didn't age very well or maybe more
Sure.
cringy than I also remember. But I just love that we're like, yes, like this woman wants her birth control. And of course, like the fact that she uses the phrase sponge worthy, like she is saying like, I know I'm worth it, but are you worth it? Like all of this like self-worth tied up in her her sexual conquests. I love that.
I completely agree. Of course, that term became pretty classic, pretty iconic for the series. And one of the things I love about Elaine, and we talked about this on your podcast, but she's very self-possessed. I mean, she has her moments here and there, but for the most part, she is this single woman living her life in New York City. She doesn't really have any reservations about being herself. So in the beginning of this episode, when Kramer comes up, he wants to know about her birth control, and she's like, I don't, she kind of hesitates, and she does seem a little bit like shy to be like, the sponge, okay, that's what I use.
I don't it's shy, but it's also like irritation, just of like, I don't need to share this with you. This is not important to you. Like, I don't need to justify myself and tell you like what kind of birth control I use. This is not a conversation that we as two platonic friends need to have.
But I think it's interesting too that he asks, "Are you still on the pill?" Like, so there's been, for whatever reason, a discussion in this group about Elaine's birth control methods. In a very earlier episode, I can't remember the season, but she talks about having her diaphragm. Her diaphragm falls out of her purse and all that stuff. So it's been discussed, but that's a little peak too with Kramer. Like, are you still on the pill? So it's like, she's like, oh God. And you're right. Yeah, it's definitely like, why are we talking about this? But at the same time, Kramer kind of seems to me a little bit evolved in that sense, where he's like, why can't we talk about it? It's birth control. Why can't we talk about it in open forum?
Right. Yeah. I mean, he is right. He is right. Like we should be talking. It should be talked about so that no one feels ashamed to talk about
Exactly.
it when it comes up for them. But also, we don't need to tell everyone we don't need to like walk into the room and like, hi, I'm Amie. My pronouns are she, her, and my birth control method of choice is like, we don't need to like get into everything.
Right.
Like,
but that does track with Kramer's character. He has no filter. He will ask anything.
Yeah.
He'll tell you anything. So,
but you're right. That is like very evolved because this is like not even really a big deal. This is not he's not like demanding like, what birth control do you use? I must know. It's just like an offhanded thing in a conversation.
Exactly.
Because she is more of an expert than he is. And I think he does recognize that to some extent.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a man and I don't know that much about birth control, but I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Exactly.
On the subject.
And contrary to that, George has no clue about Susan's birth control. So he's just like, whatever, I don't know.
Absolutely. The
right. You don't know what I use, do you? I mean, in that situation, it's like you should know that. You are the person having sex with her. You should, and you guys are committed. That's probably something you should know. Right. But of course, I love how that's called out.
Yes, I think it's a way of shoehorning in that like birth control is everybody's responsibility. It's not just
totally
one party's responsibility. It is absolutely a man's responsibility. I've definitely been in that situation. Like I was seeing someone and the subject of birth control came up and he was like, are you on the pill? And I was not at the time. And he looked irritated. He rolled his eyes. And I think it was because then some of the pressure for birth control was on him.
Wow.
But it should never have been on me like in the first place.
Totally. I mean, so there was this expectation that he had going like, well, she's going to take care of it. So why should I? Oh, well.
Yeah. Right.
Well, I mean, yeah, it definitely with George, I mean, it tracks with his character as well to be completely clueless about Susan's birth control methods. But I like that it's called out, especially by Elaine. Like, you don't know? Like, how can you not know? I assume it's something.
Yeah.
But then notice too that when the subject of condoms comes up, when she can't get a sponge and she says, well, just use condoms for the makeup sex. And he's just like, no. Like, so he made the decision for himself that his birth control method, condoms, was no longer on the table once they got engaged. But I'll just trust she's doing it for me.
Which is just a bizarre.
Yeah.
Right. Just a bizarre thing to say. Yeah, I love the whole storyline with the condom too. I mean, even Susan is like, why don't we just use it? Let's just use a condom.
I know. And yet he refuses. And, I think the typical thing you hear from guys is that the sensation's not the same. They don't want to use condoms for that reason. But I do like this sort of curveball. It's like, no, it's the packaging. I cannot get that packaging open in time.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
Like it's like a bag of chips.
Which is so funny. I was watching this episode and my husband was watching with me. And I said, did you know that the bag of chips method is actually very bad to use? And he was like, no, he's like, I don't think I ever did that because I always had the little tear thing on the side,
Yeah.
And I said, we had this in college, this kind of sex education expert. It was a wide range. It wasn't teaching us what sex was, but it was just kind of like, hey, safe practices and stuff, came to our dorm and did this little thing in our lounge. And I remember, I don't know why I remember this, but she says you never want to open it like a bag of chips because you could grab the condom, you could tear it, or you could, cause damage to the actual condom. So we really encourage you not to open it that way. So that random memory always like pops in my head. And maybe I'm educating someone right now, someone out there who's been doing this method. You shouldn't do that. You should.
I think you are. You don't. Yeah, don't do that.
Don't do that.
Also, I think it does say in the instructions. So like read the instructions. Right. I mean, even if it seems obvious, read the instructions.
Take a little time
and just and tear.
And then of course in the little hand shot, it's Susan who opens it like pretty easily. It's just like, George, can you do anything? And just some additional thoughts about this scene. I love Elaine's expression when she finally tells Kramer, like her eyes are darting around the today sponge. Like she really doesn't want to be talking about this. And I also think JLD definitely breaks after Kramer says, Louis Rukeyser. That laugh, I'm glad they kept it in, but it's clearly JLD breaking character. All right, next we are at Jerry's apartment. Jerry's on the phone with Lena, and we hear him use his whole speedboat story to get past her curiosity about how he got her number. Next, we're in George's car. Susan tells George how much she likes Jerry's jeans. He's really thin. Not as thin as you think, George says. Susan says, well, what are you talking about? He's a 31. I saw the tag. The tag, huh? George reveals there's something about that tag. It's no 31, and let's just leave it at that. Well, Susan needs to know, what are you talking about? He scratches out the 32 and puts in a 31. Oh, how can he be so vain? Well, George says, this is the Jerry Seinfeld only I know. And George says, I can't believe I told you that. Why not? Well, Jerry doesn't want anyone to know. Susan says, well, it's okay. I'm your fiance. Everyone assumes you're going to tell me everything. George says, I've never heard of that. Well, you've never been a couple. I've coupled. Keeping secrets. This is just like your secret bank code. George points out this is different. That was my secret. This is Jerry's secret. We have attorney-client privileges here. And if he plays by Susan's rule, he'll be cut out of the loop. All right, next we're in Jerry's apartment. George enters so irritated. Jerry asks him, what's the matter? I had a fight with Susan. Yeah, about what? George is about to get into it and then realizes, no, he really can't. Clothing, something, I don't know. And George asks what Jerry's doing tonight. Oh, I got a date with that girl, Lena. Oh, Lena, how'd you meet her? He says, actually, I met her a few weeks ago, but we see Jerry imagine how this may get back to Susan if he tells George in this moment. And then back to the present, George is sort of waiting for him to finish. You met her a few weeks ago, but I just called her today. And George is like, okay, what the hell? And then George says, hey, you want a double? What? George needs a group dynamic after the fight. Jerry's not too sure. Elaine enters really miffed. She says her friend Kim confirmed what Kramer said, that the sponge is off the market. So what are you going to do? I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to do a hard target search of every drugstore, general store, health food store, grocery store in a 25-block radius. All for these sponges? Elaine tells them, hey, women are very loyal to their birth control methods. What does Susan use? She asks George. I don't know. You don't know? I assume it's something. Kramer enters totally out of breath from walking up 5 flights of stairs since the elevator just broke. Jerry tells him, you're never going to be able to do the AIDS walk. You're in terrible shape. Hey, I'm in tip-top shape. Tip-top? Oh, better than you. Hey, I got a 31 waist, mister. Yeah, well, I'm walking for charity. What are you doing? What am I doing? Jerry says I'm dating a woman who happens to be sponsoring one of these walkers. My take on this scene, I'll get to my chat with Amie in a little bit, but I did have some thoughts. So the little hard target search little speech that Elaine gives, that is a parody of what happens in The Fugitive. Tommy Lee Jones talking about how he's going to find Richard Kimball. It's in the same vein of hard target, what they're going to be searching and what radius. So I actually didn't make that connection. I'm kind of mad at myself because The Fugitive is a movie that we keep on regular rotation in our house. It's like a comfort movie, a Sunday afternoon, like we're just kind of in our sweats, lazing around the house. I'm telling you, 90s movies like that, they're so good. They satisfy every sort of comfort bone in my body. I love the lingering look that Elaine is giving George when Kramer busts in all out of breath. It's right after she is like, you don't know what Susan uses for birth control? If you watch it, she's just kind of staring at him like, what the hell? Like, she cannot fathom that this man has no knowledge of what his fiance uses to prevent them from having kids, which is, you know, in everyone's best interest. So I just really like that choice that JLD makes there, kind of lingering her eyes at him, just going, what? Wow. Just when I thought you were the biggest idiot. Also, one thing I would love to hear what you guys think. I spied a little moment after Jerry says to Kramer, hey, I'm a 31 waist. You can see the top of Elaine's head and she kind of looks at George and does a little like double take. So I'm sure that George is having a reaction to Jerry saying that because, of course, we know George knows the truth about his 31 waist, 31 in quotes. So I wish we had a wide shot to see what George did in that moment because it obviously caught Elaine's attention. So from the top quarter of Elaine's head, seems like some action was happening there. But these are the little nerdy things I spy and love to pass on to you all. All right, next we are on Elaine's hard target search montage. We see Elaine go to a couple of pharmacies and ask for the Today sponges to no avail. And then finally, at the Pasteur pharmacy, she goes to the pharmacist and in a very defeated tone asks about the sponges. And to her shock, he says that they actually have a case in the back. A case? A case of sponges? The pharmacist looks a little taken aback, so Elaine pulls her excitement down. How many come in a case? 60. Her knees almost buckle. 60. Well, I'll take 3. 3. And make it 10. 10? She nods, sort of squinting at him. 20 sponges should be plenty. You say 20. Yeah, 25 sponges is just fine. 25. You're set with 25. Yeah, just give me the whole case and I'll be on my way. My take on this scene, we have here one of the best scenes and best performances of the entire series. JLD is a master, utterly brilliant. I love this scene. Amie and I had a really fun talk about it, and I'd love for you to hear it. Back to Elaine. I love this determination she has. And to your point, though, hoarding all the birth control probably isn't the best way to do this. But at the same time, she's looking out for number one and really doesn't want to risk running out of this. And she's not switching. You know, it's like, well, I guess you have to find a different way now. But then we also find out that Lena, the girl Jerry's dating, I think she's the reason Elaine couldn't find any. I think talk about hoarding.
I think she is. She must be.
Yeah.
I mean, because like, I don't know any other reason that you would, I assume that the sponge expires.
Yes.
So I'm not sure under other circumstances besides like a recall or they stop manufacturing the product, that you would hoard them like that.
It's so funny you said that. So I went on the IMDb page, which I do every time I cover an episode, and I just see if like there's anything kind of interesting in the trivia. There's always that trivia section. And just because we're talking about it, someone did the math. Okay, so it says when Jerry opens up Lena's closet, at least 12 cases are visible above Jerry's waist level, and probably another 12 boxes below that are outside the camera's frame. 24 boxes at 60 sponges is 1,440 sponges. The spermicide on the sponge was good for about 2 years before it expired. Lena could have had sex twice a day, every day for 2 years before her sponges lost their effectiveness. So someone took the time to do that. So I just wanted to, I wanted
That's great.
Yeah,
I love that.
I love that too. I'm like, I didn't even think about it, but I love that someone, took the time, was like, well, this is what I think. So Lena she could have really been living it up with her sex life. And also I thought this was interesting it's actually in the goofs section of the IMDb page, where they say that at the end, Elaine tells Billy that she can't afford two of them when in actuality, and this is, truth be told, I was like 16 when this episode came out. I mean, I couldn't have been more virginal. There was nothing happening in my life in this arena. So
same. Yeah.
I couldn't even fathom what a sponge was. I was like, I know what condoms are, I guess, but like, I just had no frame of reference for this. But anyway, so this is, and I still don't know a lot about sponges, probably because they haven't been on the market for a while, but there's an error that says at the end, Elaine says she can't afford two of them when her boyfriend Billy implies if they can go for another round of sex, when in reality, the sponge can be inserted up to 24 hours before sex and needs to be left in place for at least 6 hours after sex. So as long as you don't go over wearing a single sponge for over 30 hours, Elaine could have slept with him again without sacrificing another sponge. Again, I love the time people take.
Yes, I did read that. I did read that in some of my research.
Okay.
That yes, you could use it more than once.
I think that's too much to get into. Yeah.
I think it is. Yes. I mean, and then the button doesn't work. If she's like, if she starts reciting facts about the sponge, well, yes, Billy, we
actually,
the way this product works is actually,
I mean, I don't know. That's hilarious. No, exactly. We need to make the button work. We need to make we need that comedy factor over any kind of facts about sponges. The hard target search little montage is always delightful for me because I love how they shoot it. It's just this old timey music, which I don't know if I love. I don't know if it really fits, but I accept it for what it is.
I don't think it does at all, which I guess is sort of hilarious.
They've used it before.
I was going to say, I think they just used it before. I think they just had it of like, here's our montage music.
Yes. Yeah.
Quick peppy montage.
So the audience knows what's happening. I believe it was used when Kramer and Newman are collecting bottles to do their whole, Michigan bottle exchange thing to get money.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, aside from the music, I think it's shot so well. I feel like Julia Louis-Dreyfus is really over, gesticulating with her mouth. She's like, "Do you need to date sponges?" Like, it's like you can see it, and then they're all like, I love that part. And to me, one of the best scenes in the series is when she finally happens upon that pharmacy that has the case left. Talk about that scene. How do you feel about that?
Such a great scene. I mean, it's so genius. Like she goes through like a full journey of emotions and like, it's just, it's everything all at once. Like she's so excited when she's like, "You have a case?" and then she's like, "Play it cool, play it cool, play it cool." Okay, I'll take one sponge. I'll take 3. I'll make it 10. 20 should do it. And I just think in playing off the pharmacist plays off her so well.
Gosh, so well. I know that actor does. I mean, just the look on his face and and what I love about the performance too is like she's staring at him and you can tell the wheels are turning. She's like, "Yeah, just like this many. No, yeah, just this many, and I'll be, it's just, she's calculating in her head, I think, like, well, how many could I use? How long would this last me? I just love it. That's one of the most masterful performances, I think, of the of the series for JLD. She's just, like you said, she goes through this whole
Yeah.
journey. She's dejected. She's so like, I don't even know I'm asking, but do you have it? And then that news she's not expecting. And then, yes, and then played cool. Oh, I just love it. So fun.
It's so good. It's so good. I mean, I think that when you mention this episode to anyone who's ever seen the series, this is the scene that they mentioned for this episode.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, for sure. I completely agree. All right, next we are at a restaurant, and it's the double date between Jerry and Lena and George and Susan. Jerry brags about his detergent that smells so good. It's all temperature. Lena goes in to smell his shirt and agrees it smells really good. We also see Susan smell her own shirt. I love that choice that Heidi Sweetberg made. So cute. Lena shares that she uses Planet. It's biodegradable and it doesn't pollute the oceans. Yep, the oceans are really getting very sudsy, George cracks. And Susan just glares at him. I think that was funny. That always cracks me up. I don't know why. The waiter comes by and Lena asks for all the leftovers to be wrapped up. She shares with the table that she always does this since she works at a soup kitchen every morning at 6 a.m. Jerry can't believe they serve soup that early. Yeah, that's all they have. Do the bums complain? Soup again? I'd get sick of it, George says. How could you not? I love that they focus on the fact that the bums are getting, and I don't condone the use of bums, but I'm just saying what they're saying in the scene, that they're getting soup all day and not just, oh my gosh, Lena, you're such a great person. This is so Seinfeld. Like, they're focusing on that detail. I love it. Lena asks them to guess who volunteered last week. George guesses Mick Jagger. This time Susan elbows him. And she says, no, Maya Angelou. Oh, the poet. Jerry's still on the soup subject. So they eat soup 3 times a day? I don't know, Lena responds. Did you get to talk to her? Susan asks. Who? Maya Angelou, the poet. No, Lena didn't get the chance. George says, well, I'm sure you can get in touch with her. She's a poet. What does a poet need an unlisted number for? Jerry sort of whips his head and looks at George. Susan excuses herself to go to the bathroom and Lena joins her. After they leave, George is like, why are you giving me that look? Jerry says, why'd you have to mention unlisted number? What are you talking about? Okay, look, I got to tell you something, but you cannot tell Susan. Ooh, George loves that and leans in. The actress in the scene who plays Lena is Jennifer Guthrie. She's also appeared in Beverly Hills 90210, Sex and the City, and General Hospital. I think she's adorable. The character doesn't have too much depth to her. You know, Lena is not the deepest character, but I think Jennifer does a good job. She plays this very sweet and charitable woman in a way that isn't annoying or preachy, which I think the Lena character could easily become. But I think Jennifer Guthrie does a good job with being very likable, but also like openly talking about her charitable acts and what she does to be such a good person. It doesn't seem like Jennifer Guthrie is acting anymore. In fact, she doesn't have any credits listed past the year 1998 when she guest starred in Sex and the City. For you Sex and the City fans, she was the friend whose husband showed his ding-ding to Carrie in the Hamptons. All right, next we are in George's car. Well, George wastes no time and tells Susan on the way home what Jerry did. She is, of course, shocked. And George says, listen, don't say anything Jerry said not to tell you. But you told me anyway? George admits, you were right. I've never really been a couple, so that's the rule. It's going to go by the rule. Thank you, honey. He asks if they want to go home and make up officially. She smiles and asks if they can go to a drugstore first. I'm out of birth control stuff. So he pulls over and she's like, oh, don't worry about parking. You can just go in. I'll sit in the car. Me go in? Why not you? You don't know what I use for birth control, do you? Sure I do. Yeah, what? It's the phone. The what? The phone. Just get me some sponges, please. George tells her, oh, those are off the market. She freaks out. She can't use anything else. She loves the sponge. She needs the sponge. And George thinks about it and gets an idea. He thinks he knows where they can get one. Next, we're in Jerry's hallway. Jerry's about to enter his place, but hears a bunch of ruckus from Kramer's apartment. He knocks on the door, and Kramer answers, holding a beer, smoking a cigar. Turns out he's hosting a poker game and he's kicking some serious butt. Jerry points out that he has the AIDS walk the next day. We hear a guy in the apartment asking Kramer, "Are you in? Oh, you see those two ladies I got showing? Do they look scared?" Jerry's like, "You're never going to make it." Kramer's having too good of a time. He closes the door and says, "Let's go, let's go." Side note, this scene has some of the best bloopers. Jerry cannot keep it together, especially when Kramer kind of turns his head to him. It's very funny. You can definitely find it on YouTube, I'm sure. Bloopers for Seinfeld. All right, next we are in Elaine's apartment. Elaine and Billy are canoodling on the couch. I'm stealing Amy's term there. And he asks if she wants to move this to the bedroom. Oh, okay. Hold on just a sec. Elaine gets up and then there's a knock on the door. "Elaine, it's me, George." She opens the door. George apologizes for bothering her so late and greets Billy. "Hey, how you doing?" George asks if she got any of those sponges. "Yeah," she says. "Cleaned out the whole west side." Why? No? Susan uses the sponge. Susan loves the sponge. Well, Elaine tells George she can't help him out. There's no way, no how. George pleads with her. He tries to make a case for makeup sex. And yeah, she knows all about it. She's really sorry. The one last try, he says, makeup sex is really all he has left. "I'm sure you'll have another fight, George." She stomps on his foot and closes the door. Turns back to Billy. "Hold that thought." And we see a quick scene of Elaine in her bathroom. She gets a sponge. As she's looking down at it, we can see her thinking about something. Ba 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 ba. Boom ba dum boom 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 boom. We have a Gilmore Girls Seinfeld connection. Okay, we have here one of the most profound Gilmore Girls Seinfeld connections. Billy is played by Scott Patterson, who plays Luke Danes in Gilmore Girls. Luke was the main love interest of Lorelai, who is one of the Gilmore Girls, Lorelai Gilmore. I am such a fan of his performance in this episode, huge fan. I think he is so funny as Billy. He's got great timing, great delivery. He fits into this cast really well, I must say. He totally gets that Seinfeld tone and timing. It's just, I don't know if you can teach that, but Scott Patterson nails it. And I have to say, the chemistry with JLD is pretty electric. Also, definitely one of the hottest boyfriends, I think. I think Scott Patterson's very attractive. And I was curious what his experience was like to be on Seinfeld. And I found this quote from Scott Patterson. He said, "Surreal. It was surreal. Made me feel like I had a chance to do something in the business. Jerry, Michael, Jason, and Julia are not only dynamic actors, they are ferociously talented comedic actors, and that was intimidating. The fact that they were all so helpful and supportive during the week of rehearsal only cemented, for me, this huge respect I had and have for them all. Just a dream come true being with them. It truly was. Multi-camera comedy filmed before a live audience is as close as it gets to doing live theater, and there is nothing more vital than that. Throw in perhaps the top comedy series ever produced in Seinfeld, and that's a fairy tale, floating above the ground for a week. Jason and I had lunch a few times during that week, and Michael gave me a box of Cubans. Class acts all." What a lovely quote, and that is that's kind of the dream scenario. I love that everyone was very supportive. I love that they just kind of took him in and embraced him. I don't know if that's the typical experience when you're a guest star. I feel like it might not be. It's very dependent on the show. But that just warms my heart that he had such a great experience. And that probably came out in his, once again, perfect performance as Billy. I think he is fantastic. And as you can imagine, Amie and I had a lot to discuss about this scene. And here it is. Now, let's move ahead to when Elaine refuses George the sponge.
Come on. George has it coming. Yeah, we'll set the scene a little. So she is she started seeing a new guy, Billy.
Yes.
One of her just, generic Seinfeld love interests.
Totally.
Yeah, I feel like Sex and the City had sort of a similar thing if the guys are a little bit anonymous and they could be anybody and they're not the point.
They're not the point at all. No, this is just a body to have here to get the story give the story.
He's cute enough. I feel like he's wearing the same outfit in every scene that we see him in. He's wearing like a Canadian tuxedo look, I'm pretty sure, in every scene.
Oh, totally.
So they're canoodling on the couch.
Mm-hmm.
Things are heating up.
Yeah.
Yeah. He suggests they move it into the bedroom, which I mean, I feel like, that's very coded 90s talk for like, let's have sex. I mean, if you're like dating someone and it's all like fun and new, you're probably not going to move to another location.
Yeah. Just
as long as you don't, there's no, right. There's no like roommates or anybody else who's going to like happen upon you. What's the point?
Yeah, I know and also we have to just be like, okay, in sitcom world, they have to do this. They have to say,
right.
This is the setup for her to, first of all, get interrupted by George.
Right. And so it's like crystal clear those are the stakes. The stakes are sex with this guy that she has not had sex with yet and is excited to see what that's like.
Yep. And the give me just a second is to get the sponge in place, obviously.
Yes.
I think the timing of George's visit and then I don't know why it always cracks me up when he's like, hey, how you doing? And he like, just waves at the guy. He's like, hi. Such bad timing.
Right? Like, dude, come on, dude.
Yeah. I know. It's late at night. What do you think we're doing? And just the way Elaine is like, oh, okay. Yeah. Like, I get I get it. Can't help you out. Yeah, I think to you, what you said before, George had it coming. In this rewatch of this podcast and really, obviously digging deep into every episode, especially Elaine's portion, she gets screwed over by these men over and over and over again. They have no regard for her feelings, nothing they do. And they're all selfish. They all have their own, very narcissistic ways. But Elaine gets worse as time goes on, but like, I think in these moments, she's going, no, I don't want to give you one. I might have if you didn't screw me over 800 times in the last 4 years, but this is my turn to be selfish.
I feel like it also calls back to that first scene when she asks him what Susan uses and he doesn't know. Yeah. And she's just like, well, if you don't know, why, like, you should have known that. Why should I help you out? Like, that's even worse to her. It's even worse to me. Like, I'm like, yeah, that's right, Elaine. Like, he doesn't even know. He didn't even know what she used until like he needs something from you.
Exactly. That's the key, I think, right? When he needs something, he's there. He wants, to be all polite and ask. I also think, and so I just covered the pool guy. I just released it today. The pool guy episode. Now, this is the one episode where Susan and Elaine try to be friends. And at the end of the episode, Susan's like, yeah, I'm good. All you guys do is sit around and talk. I can't stand it. So she makes the decision that she doesn't like, George is freaking out. Worlds are colliding. But it turns out she's not even interested. But the small glimpse we get of Susan and Elaine having a friendship, it's like, I think Susan would have been an ally to Elaine. She would have been that voice of reason that Elaine tends to be in the group. But I couldn't help but think, just coming off of that episode, in this one, like, if they were friends, I bet Elaine would have Susan in on her hard target search, and they would have been together, like trying to get this sponge, just one of those things I like to create in my head.
Yeah. Which it would have been a very different episode of like, them like, let's divide and conquer. Like you take above these streets and I'll take below these streets. Every pharmacy.
The alternate reality of Susan and Elaine's friendship and George wouldn't have had any issues. No condom wrapper, nothing.
No. I mean, and I feel like things would have worked out differently for Susan in the end as well. I feel like she probably would have broken up with George a lot sooner.
Yeah, they wouldn't have had to kill her off. Poor thing. Right. All right, next we are in George's apartment. We see Susan on the phone spilling the tea about Jerry getting Lena's number. And just like Jerry thought, it makes its way directly to Lena herself through a series of phone calls. Now, the actress who plays Monica, he got her number off an AIDS walk list. That actress is played by Susan Moore. There's not a ton about her on IMDb, but she did appear in 2 other shows mentioned on Seinfeld, Melrose Place and Murphy Brown. I thought that was amusing. She delivers her one line very well. I believe she is shocked by what Jerry did. The actress in me wonders about this actress's experience. I mean, she has one line. It's used twice in the episode. Was this a half day of shooting? Did she know? Was there more to it that was deleted? Just wonder about Susan Moore's experience because I'm a nerd. All right, next we are in Jerry's apartment. Lena confronts Jerry about how he got her number. How'd you find out? Friend of a friend of a friend knows Susan? George. Jerry starts to apologize, but Lena says, I'm fine with it. Jerry looks at her curiously. She leaves his apartment at the same time that Kramer's poker party leaves. They went all night. Jerry can't believe it. You have the AIDS walk in like 3 hours. You're never going to make it. Oh, Kramer blows him off. The AIDS walk, that's a cakewalk, and goes back to his apartment. George enters, and Jerry tells him that Lena found out how I got her number. George pauses. How'd that happen? Friend of Susan's. My Susan? Why'd you tell her? George apologizes and tells him about the couple rule. Jerry says, well, this means that you're out of the loop. Of course, George begs him to reconsider. It won't happen again. So Lena was upset, huh? And Jerry says, well, that was the amazing thing. She didn't mind. There's something very strange about her. She's too good. She cares about people. Jerry says he can't be with someone like that. Can't have sex with someone he admires. Where's the depravity? I mean, Jerry can't even imagine she has sex. Elaine enters, on the other hand, and George is still pissed at Elaine. Thanks again for last night. And she says, hey, I didn't even use one. Well, Jerry's curious. Well, I thought you said it was imminent. Yeah, it was. But she couldn't figure out if he was really sponge-worthy. Sponge-worthy? And she says she needs to conserve these sponges. But you like him. This is what the sponges are for. Yeah, but now that they're off the market, she needs to reevaluate her entire screening process. She can't afford to waste any of them. George tells her she's nuts for these sponges. George is getting frustrated. For my take on this scene, I will turn it over to my chat with Amie. Sponge-worthy, the term itself is fantastic.
And the first time that Elaine says it, it's not a thing. It's very subtle how she comes into Jerry's apartment and George is there and she's talking about it and she just says, just very offhandedly, she's like, I don't know if he's sponge-worthy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great. It's great. And it's, she's having this dilemma. It's not like, of course, George is mad at her as she walks in and she's just like, hey, I didn't even use one. Okay. And I love how those conversations are they just seem so organic and very natural. Like Jerry's like, well, you said it was imminent. And oh yeah, well, now that they're off the market, I can't afford to waste any of them. And George is just so pissed, I just feel like, and then I do wonder, I'm like, what did Elaine do once she ran out of those sponges?
Right.
What was Elaine's method? I'm thinking she went back to the diaphragm. I don't know. Or maybe when we know she's been on the diaphragm on pills. I don't know.
In my research, I came across a really interesting article. I believe it was Vice. I could be mistaken about that, but it was about 90s TV writers who used diaphragm for their female characters, even though diaphragms weren't widely used at that time. They were much more of a like 60s, 70s kind of thing. And they weren't really it was a very small, it was like maybe 10% of the population. So this writer is wondering, did the writers of the 90s, they either just didn't know a lot about birth control. There's something kind of funny about the diaphragm inherently.
I can see that.
And there's something sort of because it is a little bit more medical, you have to go and get quote unquote fitted for one. You basically just have to get measured for one. If there's something about that appealed to them.
Yeah, that's so interesting you say that, because let's face it, especially in the 90s, those writers' rooms were dominated by men. I feel like maybe I wonder the age then, they were probably growing up late 60s, early 70s or something. Maybe it's something they heard their mothers and their maybe I don't think they would be saying it on TV. I guess I'm not sure. And at that time, it doesn't seem like it would be very accepted to like talk about that stuff on TV, like network TV at that time. But yeah, maybe it's just something that they would see in their mom's magazines or something. So it's like that's what they have in their head. That's so interesting
Yeah.
because I know it was mentioned in a Friends episode. I know Monica calls
Yeah.
a boyfriend, I think it was Richard, and she's just like, I left my diaphragm at your place. And again, the age I was during these shows in the 90s, I'm in high school. I'm not, I mean, like, I can't even stress enough how much of a virgin I was. So like, I just was like, I guess this is a cool, maybe I'll get a diaphragm one day. I don't know. Like, it's so interesting to think about it
I'm
in
pretty
that
sure
respect.
I had the same thought because there were so many sitcom characters
Yeah.
um that talked up, like, if they talked about birth control, they talked about
Their
their
diaphragm.
diaphragm.
Yeah. Uh,
Yeah.
but I do remember, oddly enough, in Sex and the City, do you remember when Carrie gets her diaphragm
Yes.
stuck? I mean,
Yes,
that
and
was
she
like,
calls Samantha to help her
yes,
get it out. Yeah.
that's like early 2000s. So it's like, Carrie,
Yeah.
just get on the pill.
Right.
Like, I don't know. That's so interesting. But I think there's something to that. Like, just the word itself might sound, and I guess, I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking too deep into this. At that point, was that just the accepted form? Was there a taboo to being on the pill? I don't know. I guess I don't know that history, but
I mean, the pill is also like from the 60s, so
yeah,
I wouldn't imagine. I
yeah,
don't, maybe the pill is like lower stakes because if you're on the pill, like,
right,
it's just like a regular thing, like blah blah blah. It's just a regular part of your day, but the
yeah,
diaphragm, you have to insert it prior
yes.
to sex, so
It's
it's like
more
a
of a
little bit like a
production,
condom.
right,
Yeah,
right,
it's like
right,
a little
right.
bit more of a production, and it's like condoms, but then without having to say condoms, it's like that, that like form
Yeah,
of birth control.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
I mean, we're
yeah, I'm
talking
not
about it, so it stuck. So whatever they were
right.
going for, just using the word diaphragm. I mean, I personally don't know anyone who's ever used a diaphragm. I wonder if they still
I
make
do not
them.
either.
Yeah.
I think they do, but well, actually, I do not know if they do. But yeah, they did. They were like even in the 90s, like the
Hmm.
percentage of women who used them was like 10%. It was so
Yeah.
low.
Yeah.
It was so low.
I think the Today Sponge was a thing. I think it was an actual
It
product.
was a thing.
Yeah.
Yes, 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 yes. I did. I loved this little bit because I feel like in the back of my brain somewhere, I was like, I remember this. I
Yeah.
remember when this happened. So
Hmm.
yes, there was a this exact product was on the market and it was recalled
Mm.
right around the time of this episode. It was recalled for a manufacturing error. There was bacteria in the sponge, so they
Oh,
just took it off the market altogether
yeah.
because if you know anything about women's anatomy,
Yeah.
bacteria, in a very,
Infections. Right.
porous,
Oh
yes,
God.
yeah, you're probably going to get an infection, especially if you have to leave this thing in for like 30 hours or
Oh
whatever,
my
or you
gosh.
can leave it in for 30
It doesn't seem,
hours.
because I think we've all learned how, I mean, sponges are gross. Like all sponges.
Yeah, all
The
sponges.
sponge, they're
Yes.
disgusting. Like you
Yeah.
probably shouldn't use a sponge to even clean your dishes. And so to think just even the
No.
word inserting a sponge, it's like, and then, yeah, in that area of all areas, I do
Yeah.
remember now I used to, TMI alert, but like I used to get UTIs all the time, like back in like my early 20s. It was just I was prone to them, even
Yeah.
though I do
I
like
mean, yes, women are so prone to them, and yes,
yeah.
some women are just more prone to them than others.
Finally, I had a good doctor who told me that. I mean, every doctor I would see would just tell me, well, you probably aren't doing this, you probably aren't doing that. And I'm like, I'm doing all of this stuff. Do you think I want these? Like, these are the worst.
Right.
Like, they are awful.
Yeah.
But I remember she was sort of, I think she was probably in her 60s. She was a little bit older, but she was the doctor that was finally like, I don't want you to feel bad about this anymore. Cause I was like in tears. I was like, this is like the fourth one I've gotten in like 3 months. I swear I'm doing everything. And
Oh,
she's like, don't blame yourself. Some women, their anatomy, just how they are, you're just more prone to getting them. And yeah, no matter what it's not your fault. Like she like had that, the Goodwill Hunting moment. It's not your fault. And I was like, ah. But like, it was totally,
and you're bawling.
I'm bawling, I was like, finally someone said it. But she, again, because of my Seinfeld brain, she was like, well, at least she's like, I was a doctor when that sponge was a big thing, and the amount of women who I had to see because of the infections that happened. Like, so she had mentioned how that product was so like just not healthy for a women's anatomy. I'm like, wow, that is
Yeah.
so interesting because you just think about
You-
bacteria. Ugh, not good.
right.
Not good.
And it's then soaked in spermicide,
Yes.
which I mean, I just feel like that there are people that are like very sensitive to
Yes.
that. It's like a pretty harsh chemical.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you're
I
just
mean,
you're just
it's just all. Who came
you're
up
just
with this stuff?
letting it right,
Soak
just
into
letting
your
it bake
system.
inside,
I know.
right? Yeah, it's this is I guess that's why, like, there is a scene in the episode where, Elaine, I think it's the first scene when Kramer's like, what do you use for birth control? And, um, when she hears that the sponge has been discontinued,
Yeah.
she immediately is like, oh my God, like, what am I going to do? And she says, like, women are really loyal to their birth control methods,
Yep.
which, like, watching it now, I'm like, are we, or is it just that, like, we are loyal to the thing that's finally worked, that's the least obnoxious?
All right. Next, we are at the AIDS walk. Kramer checks in at the registration table. The woman tries to give him an AIDS ribbon, but he refuses. You don't want to wear an AIDS ribbon? No. She keeps pushing it on him, and he calls her a ribbon bully. Kramer walks away, and she's yelling after him, hey, get back here! Get back here and put this on! The actress here is ELAINE Getz. She definitely made her rounds in those 90s sitcoms with appearances on Caroline in the City, Sybil, Third Rock from the Sun. Unfortunately, she passed away in 2005. And I like her. For some reason, she is really memorable to me. I know I'd seen her in like other things, and I'm like, oh, she's the woman from the AIDS walk. She just stuck in my brain for whatever reason. I do love the way she says, but you have to wear an AIDS ribbon. Like, she's so much attitude right away. And what a fun scene to shoot, like a one-on-one with Michael Richards, and you get to yell at him. Again, I think about the actor experience, and I just think that would be a really fun day. Next, we're in Monks. George is bitching to Susan about Elaine and the sponges, how she won't share them. Well, I don't understand why you can't just use condoms. Oh, no, he says. Condoms are for single men. He says once they got engaged, he said goodbye to the condom forever. Well, just once for the makeup sex. George says that they're way past that. Susan begs him. No, he hates the condom. Why? He can never get the package open in time. Well, Susan doesn't understand that. You just tear it open. Well, it's not that easy. It's a lot of pressure. Next, we're back at the AIDS walk. Kramer is walking along, and a fellow walker notices that he's not wearing a ribbon. And Kramer says, well, I don't wear one. Well, a lot of the people around him don't like this. They get on his case. Who do you think you are? Then one of them yells forward to Cedric, Bob, this guy won't wear the ribbon. And we see the same guys who stole the armoire. Who doesn't want to wear the ribbon? And Kramer recognizes them and immediately gets frightened. The actress in this scene, one of the female walker who chimes in here, is played by Patricia Bethune. She is actually a Daytime Emmy Award winner for her portrayal of Nurse Mary Pat on General Hospital. Maybe she knows Jennifer Guthrie. They were both on General Hospital together. She's also appeared in Mad Men and True Blood. I love her attitude here. Again, such a fun guest role to yell and eventually beat up Kramer on a super fun day. Ba 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 boom ba boom 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 boom. I sped that one up because it's our second Gilmore Girls Seinfeld connection. Patricia appeared in Gilmore Girls in the episode called Keg Max. She played one of the mothers in the booster club that Lorelai was forced to join. All right, next we are in Elaine's apartment. She is, for lack of a better term, interviewing her boyfriend Billy about whether or not he's sponge-worthy. She needs to hear his case. And he says, yes, he's sponge-worthy. He thinks he's very sponge-worthy. So he points out that they have a good rapport. He lists his physical and professional accomplishments and also includes at the end, speaking frankly, he's quite good at it. Elaine's taking all of this in, but then she points out his sideburns. Yeah, I told you, I'm gonna trim my sideburns. And the bathroom in your apartment, I cleaned it this morning. It's spotless. He does this little smile after he says that. Again, why I think Scott Patterson nails his performance. It's like almost childlike. It's spotless. Well, Elaine takes a few beats and says, All right, let's go. And they head back to her bedroom. Amie and I had a blast talking about this scene, as you can imagine. And here is our chat. Okay, so then later in the episode, after Elaine is like, I couldn't afford to waste one. And she tells George the next day, hey, I didn't even use one. That scene, I think definitely that pharmacy scene is up there, but I also love this sort of interview scene with Billy, like run down
Yes.
your case for me again. It's just
It's
so
so
well
good.
done. Yeah.
It's so good.
He's great too. So that Scott Patterson is the actor. Now I do a segment on my show where this is only for my entertainment. I have no idea if anyone enjoys it, but I like to recognize who on Seinfeld has also been on Gilmore Girls because I enjoy that show so much. And there's so much overlap. I'm like, this person and this person. So I do this segment if there is a Gilmore Girls Seinfeld connection. And obviously, so Scott Patterson plays one of the principal characters on Gilmore Girls. He plays Luke Danes and always wears the same outfit in that character as well, which is kind of funny. But
that is funny.
That show isn't an outright comedy. There's comedic moments, but it's definitely more, I think, in the genre of drama. But he is funny. I think he's really funny. He holds up with JLD in this scene. I think when he's talking about,
Absolutely.
I think he does a really good job.
Yeah, he plays off her perfectly. He doesn't like outshine her, but he's just sort of
Right.
like the perfect, perfect companion to her in this scene.
Yeah.
Because he's not like annoyed by this process at all.
No.
He is like, no, this here's why I'm sponge worthy. Like,
I know. Yes, I think I'm sponge worthy. I'm very sponge worthy. It's so
like,
well done. I mean, I love, yeah.
It's so well done. When she's like, "Are you going to do something about those sideburns?" and he just
God.
and he gets so self-conscious and he's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna trim them."
That's, I think, the best. That's the pinnacle for me. Yeah. Like, it's just like he puts his hands there immediately. He's like, don't look at him right now. They're gonna get taken care of. Oh gosh.
And you must wonder, like, had they had this conversation before?
Right. Yes. Like she's hinted before. I want to say she's probably made some very kind of like sprinkled in comments here and there, like those are pretty long sideburns. And then it's gotten more and more. And then now that there's real stakes here, whether or not she can not waste, I guess, whether or not she could use a sponge on him.
Yes.
Now she's like, your sideburns. I've dropped enough hints. Oh yeah. It's just, oh my gosh, it's so well done. And that the pause before she's finally like, all right, let's go. I mean, there's nothing sexual about it at all. And that's why it works.
No. Yeah, exactly. Like if it was all of a sudden like, oh, okay. All right, let's go. I know it would not have been Seinfeld. It would not have been true to the show.
Right. I mean, I think this is, the crux of a lot of what they do is where they take these situations and they treat it with scenarios that don't fit necessarily the mood that it's supposed to have. It reminds me of when I was watching the DVD extra for the episode where Jerry and Elaine have that discussion on the couch about having sex again. They're both clearly like horny and they're just like they want to, but then they have to make it. They put in all those rules and all that stuff. Like if we start sleeping together, we don't want to be in a relationship, but like, what are we going to do? And I remember distinctly because I think Larry David is one of the best writers of this generation, and I think he just does such a great job with these types of. Because he said when they were blocking that scene, the director was sort of like, well, you guys should be kind of close. Like you're clear, like maybe like touching hands and all this stuff. And he came on set and he was like, what are, true Larry David fashion. He's like, what the heck is going on? Like, he was like, no, they have to be on the exact opposite sides. There can't be anything sexual about this. That's what makes the comedy work. It has to be absolutely devoid of anything flirtatious or, sensual at all. It's just this is a negotiation. And so this scene with Billy and Elaine reminds me of the same thing where it's like, no, this is like a convincing someone to hire you for a really good job.
No. And he has that energy. He's totally telegraphing that. It's not a like, I need to like prove something to you. It's more like, please, like take pity on me and grant me this this excess into your bedroom.
And I do love that his reasoning, run down your case for me again, why he's sponge worthy. Most of it has nothing to do with sex. He talks about his
Yeah.
health. He talks about his business and how successful he is. And then he does add in, if I can be frank, I'm quite good at it. Like it's just thrown in at the end. I think maybe
Yeah.
and that's what again makes the comedy work, because it's not like, well, I know what to do with the woman's body and I'm very good at, my hands are very strong or something, it's nothing physical for the most part.
Right.
And so
Yeah. It's just like, I'm a real good guy. Like a solid, upstanding citizen. I'm gonna offer up a phrase.
Yeah.
Elaine math. I feel like she's doing Elaine math
Totally.
and trying to allocate her sponges.
Exactly. I think that starts in that scene with the pharmacist. She's like, as she's going up in numbers, she's thinking about, all right, how long will this last me? And then the whole other layer is, okay, well, what's the math to get to an acceptance of actually using a sponge?
Right.
Oh, so great.
Yeah. I'm right. And he lists off all these characteristics like, my stock portfolio, my blood work, immaculate.
Yep.
And her things are like his sideburns.
Bathroom.
If he cleaned his apartment.
The tub, sink, everything got cleaned. I mean, yes, that's such a great point, right? And I think, what is that? I just was trying to think, like, what is the commentary about, maybe, and this could be very dated too, like 90s mentality of what these women are looking for versus what men are looking for. She's, he's making the case with, like you said, everything from his financial status to his health, his blood work. But she's like, that's all great. That's all big picture. But that bathroom, I can't go in there again unless the tub has been scrubbed. Oh my gosh, how funny. And there's
I think that's fair.
Right. And one thing that's kind of unsaid, but is just accepted, is like, she doesn't have to prove anything to this guy, in the sense of like,
right.
He's just there to get to have sex with her. Like, she's not having to prove anything to him other than, I'm going to accept this and we're going to use a sponge on you. It's such an empowering kind of Elaine episode in so many ways.
Yes. Yeah. Right. Like she knows her value.
All right, next we're in Lena's apartment. Jerry arrives. Lena shows him a citation she just received in the mail from shut-ins. Oh, such an eccentric group, Jerry says, because they're shut in. Of course, they're not locked in. By the way, she checked, and the soup kitchen does have cream soups. Hey, that's dynamite. Listen, Lena. Jerry starts in on his breakup speech with her, but then Lena interrupts him because she's soaking a sweater and she left the water on. She says, Jerry, can you get me a towel for my closet? So Jerry goes to the closet and sees cases of today's sponges. What do we have here? She is depraved. So this totally changes Jerry's mind. So they start up the conversation again, and she asks what he was going to say. And he tries to avoid it, and she's like, no, you said I was a good person, and that he can tell her anything. So then Jerry decides to reveal to her about what he does with his jeans, how he changes the size on them. I do that to all my jeans, so, that's it. And Lena's just staring at him in sort of disgust. Next, we're in George's apartment. We only have a shot of George and Susan's hands as he's trying to open a condom, but he's having trouble. So Susan takes it, and she's able to open it pretty easily. Come on. He drops it on the bed. It's too late. All right, next we're back at the AIDS walk, and we're in an alley, and the street toughs are really giving it to Kramer. They and the others are all surrounding him, and Bob points out that everyone is wearing the ribbon, and why won't you wear the ribbon? And he says, this is America. I don't have to wear anything I don't want to wear. So they all start closing in on him, and he tries to climb a ladder behind him, but they pull him down. We cut to Jerry and George waiting at the finish line. Jerry is telling George how his jeans confession totally turned Lena off. Well, George understands. Why do you do that? He doesn't want to be a 32. Meanwhile, George would kill to be a 32. Lena told him he wasn't sponge worthy, wouldn't waste a sponge on me. George wishes he had one. That condom killed me. and asks why are the packages so hard to open on those things. It probably gives a woman one last chance to change her mind. You never run out, do you? George wonders where Kramer is. Everything's finished here. Jerry's like, I told him he'd never make it. Then they see a disoriented, kind of disheveled Kramer come around the corner, and he collapses, crawls across the finish line, and flops on his back. Jerry shakes his head over him. Up all night playing poker. Let's go, George. George is about to walk away, and then he stops. He's like, hey, where's your AIDS ribbon? The tag to this episode is Miss Elaine in bed with Billy. They're waking up the next morning all happy. She feels really good. No regrets about using a sponge on him. So he goes in for some more action, and she asks, what are you doing? What do you mean? I'm sorry, she says, but I can't afford 2 of them. So this is the end of the episode, and now I'd like you to hear the remainder of my discussion with Amie Kelbing. I'm weirdly, not that I can even try it now, but I'm weird. Like when she's like, no, everybody loves this sponge. I'm like, do they? Like, what made it? I wonder what made it so great. Like, what was it like? Probably. So it seemed like you could get it over the counter. You didn't need to get fitted for it or anything, obviously. So that was probably more convenient. Maybe it was just easier to insert, like, more than a diaphragm. And yeah, you could forget about it for 30 hours. I mean, not thinking about the soaking bacterial crap in there or spermicide, like not thinking about that. I've always been curious. I'm like, gosh, why did Elaine love the sponge so much that she's willing to go all over the city to find her case?
I don't think they gave her much motivation for loving the sponge. I think it was just one of the what I read was one of the writers, Peter Melman, was like, he just heard it on the radio and was like, he heard the story about the Today Sponge being recalled on NPR and was like, well, what if that was Elaine's birth control method? What would happen?
Yeah,
what wacky hijinks would happen if Elaine didn't have access to her favorite birth control?
I like it. I'm glad that they did it. This was not something it was certainly, if birth control was mentioned, it was very much in passing in other sitcoms, but for it to be a central storyline and for it to be named the name of the episode, that's pretty great. And that's definitely groundbreaking for that time and for that type of, show on a network, major network. So I think I love that they did it. We're getting into the crux of a lot of it, but that's just what I do on this podcast. So I love to think about that stuff and just kind of wonder. But I think overall, for JLD, what a wonderful thing to play with. And she got some really fun scenes in this. I mean, she really got to stretch her comedic muscles in this one. She really does get to show so many facets of why she's such a brilliant comedic actress. I do love it also when Elaine and George, their storylines intermix. I just feel like they're the best relationship on the show. One of our contributors, Greg, calls it Benestanza, which I love that term. He's like, when there's a Benestanza episode. And it's true. I think just as actors, they're very equally matched with just their prowess. And like, they're just so good together.
Yes. They're like the foil. They are foils to each other because Elaine is so confident and George is so unconfident. Like, they like see things in each other that they hate and they take it out on the other one, and it's hilarious.
It's hilarious. And I mean, even when they're kind of getting along, when I covered the Soup Nazi episode where they're on the same team against Jerry being so overly affectionate with his girlfriend, the schmoopy, all that stuff. And they had that scene together where they're like, I know, it's so, why does he do that? And I love even seeing that. Like, I love those moments where they have together just like, oh, we're so on the same team. And oh my gosh, especially when it's against Jerry, it's always great. It's just my most favorite relationship on the show. And it's just everything they do together makes me laugh. And then in this particular one, her just refusing to help him with the sponge, it tracks for their relationship. It just makes so much sense to me.
Yeah. I think the thing I dislike this episode was not, an Elaine thing. It was sort of related to Elaine, um, that apparently her seeking her birth control meant that she was depraved.
Right. Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like Jerry's
And
whole
then,
thing, like he can't have sex with someone he respects. She's too good.
yeah,
Oh
right. And
God.
then, and then because she has stockpiled, whatever 1,400 sponges, then, oh,
Yeah.
that means that she's depraved. So,
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I mean, it's a Jerry.
yeah, it's
He's
very Jerry, but
it's very Jerry, and it's so it's so like
just,
gross.
it is very gross, but just his confidence in himself of like, I can judge these women and it's fine and it's funny that I say this.
Yeah. It's not a birth control device. It's a I wanna fuck device. Like to him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like, or maybe she just cares about her reproductive health.
Right.
Asshole.
Yeah. And like I don't think that the character Jerry ever claimed to be child free, but I feel like he was. Maybe he didn't like recognize it or accept that, but he wasn't like, "Oh my God, I can't wait to have kids." So like he was the
Right.
benefactor of all of these women caring about birth control. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
he was the
I know that
direct benefactor of this.
exactly. Oh yeah. I mean, I think I you're right. I don't think it's ever explicitly said where he's like doesn't want to have kids. Even when the subject comes up where he's accusing Elaine of like, of course you want to have kids. Kramer wants to have kids. He admits it even. But yeah, Jerry, it's like Jerry's never specific about it. The whole Lena thing, it's somewhat entertaining. It's not great, but yeah, the
Yeah, it's
depravity
not
thing,
great.
it's like, what? What does that
It
even
I
mean?
I think the Lena thing went in too many different directions of
Yeah,
like, like he got her number from an AIDS walk and then like it was just fine. And then we sort of had like another, conflict between them.
yeah,
I do like episodes though where Jerry gets dumped by women who have like the same, little peccadillos that he does, where he
totally.
hyper focuses on that like one thing about them and then dumps them because of it. And she
Yep.
hyper focuses on his vanity and is like,
You're totally right. I love
yeah.
that. Yeah, she's like this giving person, does all this charity work, like and she's just like, ew, you take the time. You take the time to scratch out a number on your jeans.
Yeah.
Yeah, done. That is great. You're right. That is great. That actually kind of makes that storyline a little bit more worth it because she's just like,
Yeah.
yeah, no, you're gross. I can't stand that.
Right.
You're so vain. Well, this is great. Thank you so much, Amie. Did you have any more research or notes you wanted to refer to?
No, I think we talked about everything that I wanted to talk about.
Awesome.
I think that we are sponge worthy.
I know I'm sponge worthy and I am proud of it, even though I don't agree with that method because of everything we talked about. It's not
Yes,
good
yes.
for
It's
women's
not good for
parts.
women. No,
No,
no, it's not.
I know. But back in today's sponge times, no doubt, we are
Yeah,
completely sponge
absolutely.
worthy. Worth a
Yes.
sponge, worth 2 or 3 sponges. I mean, I'll go out on a limb and even say that.
I think we are worth a case of sponges.
We are worth, we are worthy of Lena's stockpile of sponges. 1440 sponges. Oh, well, thank you so much for being a part of this episode, Amie. I really appreciate it. Please tell people about your podcast and anything else you're doing.
Yes, so I am the host of the Spinster Life Podcast. It is a podcast about the experience of being single. I look at that through a variety of different lenses, through the lens of looking at aging, looking at perimenopause, looking at menopause, looking at famous spinsters from history. Sometimes just covering things that I like. I just did an episode about true crime, so there's just a wide variety of approaching the single experience. I also have a YouTube channel. You can check me out on Instagram, Substack. On Instagram, I'm at Living the Spinster Life, and on YouTube, I am the Spinster Life. And yeah, I have some fun. I have some fun over there.
Definitely. The subjects you cover are so important. And I really enjoy everything you talk about. It's very vulnerable, which I appreciate. I love that kind of stuff. Like that to me is what we need to do, especially as women, because a lot of things are not talked about
Yeah.
or accepted to be talked about. Yeah. And we'll put all your information in the show notes. So I really appreciate, I say we, like there's other people here. This show is all me. But anyway, I really appreciate it. And we'll have to figure out another fantastic Elaine episode for you to come back.
I would love that. Thank you so much.
It was such a pleasure having Amie. I'm so glad we were able to talk about this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed our discussion as well. And now I'm going to take a quick break, and I will see you on the other side. Just like hugs and caresses, with the certainty of flavor, just like broth boiling high, still I slurp. Hello, I'm Marguerite Jagger, president of the Maya Angelou fan club. Many of you remember the great Miss Angelou as a brilliant poet, writer, and activist. What you may not know is that one of her greatest passions was soup. Yes, soup. Maya Angelou volunteered at every single soup kitchen that she could find. She would fill bowls full of soup and love. But she was also troubled to see, well, of course, the poverty, but also the lack of soup variety at these kitchens. Unfortunately, she left us before she could do anything to help those who ate watery soups 3 times a day, which is why it is my great pleasure to introduce Maya Angelou canned soups. You can now shop Miss Angelou's passion at your local grocery store. Enjoy I Know Why the Saged Broth Sings, and a soup flung up to heaven. Maya Angelou soups offer a variety of cream soups, something she noticed the soup kitchens lacked severely. Indulge in the cream of a woman, and gather together in my cream. With every purchase of Maya Angelou canned soups, a can of soup is donated to a local soup kitchen. Even in her death, Maya is warming the hearts and stomachs of all of us. Maya Angelou canned soups. Poetry in a can. And we're back. There weren't too many extras, so I'm just going to move on to Greg's Sack Lunch. Greg is our most dedicated contributor, and this week he sent a sack full of his thoughts. His overall thoughts, he says, wow, an actual episode named after Elaine's storyline for a change. That rarely happens. This episode has a good mix for all 4, and it flows somewhat well, but Elaine and George really get the best stuff out of this one. I agree about it being named after Elaine's storyline, because that is rare. And sometimes she does have the funniest storylines, but the episode is named after something. Most of the time, I think Jerry's storylines. But yeah, it's great. The sponge, and Elaine is the one dealing with the sponge. Next in Greg's sack are his favorite scenes and Elaine moments. He says, I like the opening scene in the diner between Elaine, Jerry, and Kramer. It sets up the episode really well for the most part, with the exception of George. What I don't get, though, is how Jerry says he'll lie to Lena Small and say that he met some guy who had her number. It was Kramer's donation sheet. She donated to Kramer, so this isn't as big a deal as it's made out to be. They could have worked this better. I think it's just the ickiness of stealing it, in a sense, from an AIDS charity list. I think that wouldn't go over so well, although it does. Apparently, Lena doesn't care, but I think if I was Lena, I'd be more like, why did you make up a story about a dude and a speedboat? I see what you're saying, Greg, but I think they were presenting this as like, well, that's really icky to just sort of, this woman has gone to the trouble to unlist her number, which took more effort back then than just to have it listed in the phone book. So for him to sort of steal this off a list that she didn't intend for that to happen, right? So I think that's what they were focusing on. Next, Greg says, my favorite scene in Elaine moment is when George comes to Elaine's to get a sponge for Susan. I love how proudly she says she cleaned out the whole West Side. The final moment when she steps on his foot cracks me up. She sits there listening to him, face up to the door, so they're in the same shot, which is excellent direction, but then hurts him like she's done so many times before. Totally. I like that shot too. I love that you mentioned that. I like how she kind of rests her chin. She's like, I'm just going to wait until he's done. I know my answer. And I think maybe in that moment too, she's like, I'm stepping on him. I'm stomping that foot. I don't give a shit. I need to get some. Greg goes on to say, I also love the scene between Elaine and the pharmacist who she buys all the sponges from. I love how she keeps increasing how many she's going to take until she ends up saying she'll take all of them. I've already gone on about how much I love that scene, but yes, genius scene. Next in Greg's sack is his scene swap idea. He says, Jerry's storyline with the phone number doesn't do much for me. The actress who plays Lena is so dry, she kind of takes away any kind of comedy in this story. When she's talking about the soup kitchen or later when she says she's fine with how Jerry got the number, there's nothing to her. He says she's too good. No, she's too blah. Ooh, burn, Greg. What I would have done instead was to have a scene at the end where Elaine desperately goes to Lena's apartment asking for sponges like George had done with her. It would play into the fact that Jerry would have shared that info with Elaine like you would if you were a couple. And Lena could have shown she wasn't too good by treating Elaine as rudely as Elaine had treated George earlier. The thing with Jerry's jeans was dumb to bring back, and it looks like that's what made Lena break up, versus what would have been better was telling Elaine that she had this sponge stockpile. Ooh, I love all of that, Greg. I think that could have played really well. Yeah, I don't mind. Like I said, I don't really mind the Lena character. The Lena character is totally dry. You're right. I don't mind Jennifer Guthrie's performance. Again, you sort of play with what you're given. But I kind of like these ideas. I think that I do like Amie and I talked about, I like that Lena ended up breaking up with Jerry for such a shallow reason. Like, she's such a good person, but she's like, you are gross for doing that with your jeans. So I do like that aspect of it, but yeah, I can imagine that scene of Elaine desperately going to Lena's and being like, oh my gosh, I need a sponge. I like that. That would have been a cool callback. You know what? If we could just go back in time, right? And finally, Greg's extra thoughts. He says, superficially, I must say Elaine finally is dating a guy worthy of her in the looks department. So many times she's been paired with complete doofs. This guy is a little desperate, though. You don't have to clean your tub or whatever. I've already said how handsome I think Scott Patterson is. He is super good looking. And yeah, I definitely agree. Worthy of Elaine. And like I said, very electric chemistry between the two of them. I completely believe they were so into each other. And I don't know if I agree with you, Greg. Yeah, he could just put on a condom. Very true. Amie and I talked a lot about this. Why is the pressure only on the women here? But maybe he needed a little push to clean his bathroom better, because that's going to just be better for everyone. And finally, Greg says, I love how George is willing to tell secrets to Susan. Even after they argue the first time, he gives in and admits that this is somewhat his most serious time being in a couple, and he's willing to go along with it. It's a rare, sweet moment for George with her. I keep saying it lately, but Susan really is great. I completely agree. I didn't mention it before, but that moment where he's like, well, I'm going to go by the rule. I think that's super genuine. I don't think that was calculated in order to have makeup sex. I really think that George reflected and he was like, yeah, you're right. I've never really been a couple. You know, I agree with you, Greg. I really enjoyed that rare moment of sweetness between the two of them because it was very real. Thank you so much, Greg, for sending in your thoughts once again this week. And now it's time to close Greg's sack lunch. All right, my favorite Elaine moments. The hard target search, the entire scene at Pasteur Pharmacy. Again, doesn't get funnier or more perfect than that scene for me. It's just, I could watch it a billion times. And I'm pretty close since I watch Seinfeld all the time. A close second, well, not really close, because that scene at the pharmacy is just so head and shoulders above everything else. But I do love the scene where George is at her door, and particularly her expression when she kind of changes and she's like, I cleaned out the whole West Side. Why? I love that little shift before she says why. And my final notes. This is a perfect JLD episode. Such a fun storyline for Elaine. I wish we got more of her. No surprise there. She gets a really good chunk, but I could have used less AIDS walk stuff and more sponge. I love the sponge storyline. Thank you again to Amie Kelbing for such a fun chat about the episode. It was so great to speak to another woman about an episode and about Elaine and all the subjects and issues that come up with talking about Elaine and this storyline about the sponge. It's such a great time. And we look forward to having Amie back. We definitely will. And I will have all of her information in the show notes as to how you can listen to her podcast and follow her on social. And speaking of that, please make sure to follow Hot and Heavy on social. On Instagram, it's at Hot Heavy Elaine. On TikTok, at Elaine Venice Podcast. And if you would like to email me any thoughts, please do at elainepodcast@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time.